Hi guys, this is going to be part of a two-part essay wherein we talk about the literary analysis, which is going to be looking at the book Circe and the topic that you choose and the thesis that you create for the work Circe. We are going to be working off the PowerPoint slide titled Writing a Literary Analysis, and that slideshow is within today's lecture, so you can follow along. I'm hoping that within the first half of this video, we're going to cover slides 1 through 15, and then the second video, we will cover the remainder of the slides and any additional notes that I have for you. So that is kind of the direction that we're going with class today. I'm sorry this video is posted a little late today. I had a lot of technological difficulties and some internet failures today, so it's been a frustrating one, but regardless, I'm getting this out to you guys, and I'm hoping that if you guys have any questions, you will let me know. Now, there are a couple of housekeeping things that I want you to keep track of. You did not have a forum discussion this week. The reason for that is that I wanted you guys to get completely caught up on your reading and to make sure that you guys have Circe's read. This essay is going to be due next week. Not next week, the following week. So you're going to want to make sure that you have it completely finished by, this coming Monday to Wednesday so that you can really focus on what your paper is going to be about. Also, next week, I will be sending out a sign-up genius in case you guys want to have an individual conference with me, 15 minutes, where we can talk on the phone and make sure that your progress for this next paper or for the final quizzes has gone well. So look out for those two things as we're moving forward. And today we're going to talk about writing a literary analysis. A literary essay is not going to be a book report. It's not necessarily going to do plot mapping or some of the things that we've done earlier in the semester. Instead, on slide 2, you can see that a literary analysis is an analysis that explains what a work of literature means, or more specifically, what one portion of it means. Many of you guys created your papers on reading Lolita in Tehran, on tyranny, and on a patriarchal system. And that is kind of the topic that you felt the most comfortable talking about after reading portion 1. You're going to choose a topic, perhaps similar to that for Circe's. And you guys should note that you should have additional sources for this. So you're going to be looking for 2 additional sources in addition to Circe's. You can use any of the materials that I have sent you looking at the origin story of Circe. So you absolutely can use the Wonder Woman comic, Margaret Atwood's poems, Percy Jackson, or even the original Odyssey as you're creating this literary essay. And as we get closer to the due date of this essay, I will post a list of themes that I think would be well received. So that's something to look out for as well. When you're writing this literary analysis, you're focusing on a specific attribute. And what I'm really looking for, because this is kind of like your final exam, I'm really looking at, are you discussing the attributes of literature that we've discussed in class? So plot points, character development, setting was a big lecture. How the characters play off each other, evolution, tone and voice, any of those things would be great topics for essays. When you are discussing these attributes, you want to note that this is a rhetorical essay. So you are going to be making arguable points. You are definitely going to have a thesis statement. In chapter 21 of your textbook, it outlines 5 things that a literary essay always has. And these are the 5 elements from your book. This is on page 1046. To achieve its purpose, a literary essay must incorporate 5 elements: an effective tone, a compelling thesis and motive, ample, appropriate evidence, and a coherent structure. Though these 5 things are essential to essays of any kind, each needs to take a specific shape in literary essays. So you definitely want to think about what your thesis statement is going to be from the beginning, and I will ask that you forward that to me. And then we can talk about and dissect really whether or not it is too specific or too broad for the paper that you're going to be writing. This paper is going to be 1,000 to 1,500 words, so that's not super lengthy, even given the fact that you're working with a whole text of material. However, it should be very concise and clear what your purpose and point is. So you want to be able to defend your points with reason and evidence from the test, much like text, much like a court case. I'm going to be posting 2 examples, one today and one next week, of various essays that are really, really effective. One is a literary analysis research paper, so it's going to be a little longer than what you're doing, but still very, very effective. The second is going to be a compare and contrast, where you're taking some of the source material that I gave you and you're directly holding it side by side to see what the purpose and the tone and the character development was when looking at 2 different types of work. So for instance, you might take the Mud Circe's poems and Circe's from Madeline Miller and compare how Atwood and Miller individually defined their protagonist. That would be a great essay. I would enjoy reading it, and that would be a compare and contrast essay. So again, I will give you an example of that as well. There are various things to analyze in a story. We know this because we've spent the semester talking about it. So you can look at the structure of a story. You can look at the perspective or the point of view. You can look at rhetorical elements in the story, or you can fixate on some of the themes and some of the underlying meanings. If you're going to do the last one of these, you want to make sure that what you're saying isn't so blatantly obvious that it's off-putting to me, the professor. I'm looking for in-depth analysis here. So make sure that on your part, that is something you're doing. A lot of the interpretation of the story or the meaning of the story is broken down by themes. What themes are you seeing recurring? So there are several in this, of course. Mythology overall is a theme. Perspective is definitely a theme. Agency is a theme. And by agency, I mean having a character who can actually leave and go out and do things and make choices on their own. Agency is literally looking at a character's choices and how they're making these. Circe isn't a character with agency until a really crucial point in the story, and I would probably say it's when she goes and helps to birth the Minotaur. That would be a crucial turning point for her. And so that agency and how that develops her character becomes very, very interesting. You can talk about feminism. You can talk about male roles in what is very clearly a feminist world that Circe is creating, and how she has to adopt to her father's expectation, Odysseus's expectation, Telemachus's expectation, all of these male characters who are in her life. Or you can look for individual symbols and other devices. For instance, the lion. What is the lion symbolic of? Do you believe that is a feminist symbol that kind of carries her through? And what does it represent when that lion dies? That would be such an interesting essay. Other essential elements of the story are overall the main idea. So what is this author trying to do? Obviously, there are a number of problems and solutions that we see throughout this. This functions in many ways like a short story collection. However, there is one kind of overarching theme, and it's this theme of identity. Who is Circe? And does she change when you're looking at her from different points of view? That of her father, that of Hermes, that of Odysseus, that of Penelope. You know, how do they interact? You can look at the plot, the relationships and the patterns of events. Doing a literary essay on plot might be difficult, though. I will warn you, it can start to feel a little bit like a book report, and I don't want that to be the case. The characters, so again, take one or two characters and look at how they develop or don't develop. So it would be really interesting to look at one character who evolved. I would vote that to be Circe's, and one character that maybe is static or stays completely the same. And there are good and bad sides to this. So, I think that Hermes is a character that's very, very static. He's not necessarily a good guy, but he always kind of plays the same role. Same goes for Athena or really any of the godly roles. Whereas I think on the flip side of that, if you're looking for a character who's unchanged, but who has a good and positive impact on Circe's, you would have to talk about Icarus and Daedalus and how they really impacted who she was and what her evolution looked like, because it did change after meeting them. Setting, you recently had a journal focus on setting. I recently did a lecture on setting. Ogaga is a great and beautiful setting that has a very impactful role, particularly in the latter part of the novel. And looking at that and talking about that could become really, really interesting. You would want to draw some very careful examples. Or you could talk about point of view. What is the point of view? Why was it told in that way? Things of that nature. You guys know how plot is set up. This is an example of a plot map where we see exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, conclusions. I think an interesting paper would be about the pacing of this novel and whether it was well paced, particularly since the conclusion has a really revolutionary ending and Circe's does something that's highly, highly drastic. And so it would be really interesting to look at that. It might help you guys on slides 10 and 14. I have set up charts, and these charts really just help you graph what the novel is. This is the longest work that we've looked at throughout this class. So filling out those charts for your journal would be a great activity, and it could serve as one of your Circe's journal entries. So you could insert these charts in those areas if you choose. It is not mandatory by any stretch of the imagination, but these are great free writing tools as you're creating your paper. We've definitely talked about conflict in this class and the types of conflict that you see within literary works. So there's person versus person conflict. You also have person versus society, person versus nature, person versus supernatural, person versus self. And Circe's really goes through a lot of these. So don't think that with the types of conflict that you have to single out one with that she's going through. In reality, there are a lot of different conflicts. She definitely has a person versus person conflict with Athena. She definitely has a person versus fate conflict when it comes down to her abandonment on this island. And the entire book could be summed up as person versus self conflict, as she really tries to identify who is it that Circe's is. So looking at that would be very, very beneficial to you. We talked a lot about archetypes and character archetypes, and I think that there are a lot of characters within Circe's that fall within those character archetypes. So really look at those and do some type of discovery about what their dynamic was and how they played off one another. Okay, this brings us to slide number 16, and I will be continuing this lecture starting from slide 16 in the next link down. So you can watch these back to back, or you're welcome to take a little break, do the bathroom break, the water break thing, and I'll see you in a little bit.